Why hello there folks, and welcome back to Nature Explained. I'm your host Jake, and in today's feature we'll be going to the far north of our planet in search of an animal which is known to actively hunt and kill people, and its name is the polar bear, the White Death. Polar bears are found mostly in the northern hemisphere, around the Arctic Circle, as well as adjacent areas, mostly in the countries of Greenland, Canada, Russia, and the state of Alaska in the USA, alongside the islands of Svalbard, which is owned by Norway. And when I say the far north, I mean it, like 16 miles away from the North Pole. That's how far in the north we're talking. They've also been found as far south as the island of Newfoundland in Canada. Polar bears are occasionally found in Iceland as a result of icebergs bringing them down there. As a result of their wide range, polar bears have been divided into 19 subpopulations, with the Queen Elizabeth subpopulation being contested. Polar bears are classified as marine mammals as they spend most of their lives on sea ice. But when the sea ice melts for the summer, many polar bears will instead swap the sea for land, living in forests, mountains and creeks, to name some of the environments. Although, depending on how far north they live, they may not have to abandon the ice and will stay on it all year. One of the ways they've adapted to live in the ice is by making their feet hairier than other species of bear, providing both extra warmth but also more grip in the snow and ice, much like their claws, which act much like ice picks, which are useful both when moving across the ice but also when hunting prey. This isn't surprising when you learn that polar bears are both the largest living bears as well as holding the title of the largest land carnivore, with males being larger than females, being between 6.6 to 8 feet long, as well as 4.3 to 5.2 feet tall at the shoulders. Alongside this, males weigh between 300 and 800 kilograms, although their weight fluctuates during the year, increasing sometimes by 50%. Males possess bigger heads, with around 34 to 42 teeth, which have adapted to eat a meat diet, so are incredibly sharp for better grip, coupled with a bite force of 1,300 psi, which is the most out of all the bears, and more than a spotted hyena, and those guys eat bones. Like most bears, they have small tails, being around 3 to 5 inches long. When comparing a polar bear to a brown bear, polar bears are slender, have smaller skulls, but have a larger neck with a smaller hump. Like most Arctic species, polar bears have an undercoat which is 5 centimeters long, and a coat of guard hairs, which are hollow, allowing heat to be trapped and letting the bear float in water. These hairs also scatter ultraviolet light between the underfur and skin, resulting in a constant cycle of absorption and re-emission, allowing the bear to keep warm. This guard hair layer is around 15 centimeters long, with the hair on male forelegs being longer, which is a sign of their fitness. One of the things you may have noticed about polar bears is that they have white coats, which allows them to better camouflaging with the Arctic, but will change when exposed to the sun, making it appear slightly yellow. But if the bear has recently molted, it can appear a greyish brown. Because polar bears spend most of their lives in or near water, their fur has evolved so it doesn't tangle when wet, and can easily be shaken off, ensuring the bear doesn't suffer from hypothermia. Polar bears generally keep a core temperature of 36 degrees Celsius. They do this in numerous ways, such as maintaining a large fat layer which can be 10 centimeters thick, acting as insulation, but is mainly for energy reserves. If a polar bear is overheating, they will either alter the size of their blood vessels or will go into a pool of water to cool off. A polar bear's nose is among the most powerful assets it has, being evolved to allow warm air to pass through the nasal passage, ensuring that they don't suffer from frostbite. The nose is so powerful that they can smell prey from up to 3 miles away. This is literally 1,000 times better than humans, and some claim they can smell food in a sealed tin. One of the reasons for this powerful nose is that one of the ways they hunt is by sniffing through the ice looking for seals, so it makes sense to evolve a very powerful nose. Much like its nose, the skin of a polar bear is also black. This is so they can absorb heat they emit, as well as heat given from the sun. Polar bears have small eyes, which are the result of having to adapt to blowing wind and snow blindness. As a result of this, though, there is a trade-off, as polar bears cannot see the colour green, but they can see fairly well in the dark. Their eyes are also close to the top of their head. This is for 2 reasons. First, they are carnivores, so need to see forward, but also, this allows them to keep their heads out of the water when they're swimming. Polar bears also have excellent hearing, despite the smaller ear sizes, which is to prevent heat loss and frostbite. They can hear between 11.2 to 22.5 Hz, although the reason for this high Hertz count is unknown because most of their prey make low noises. With all these adaptations, you might be surprised to know that polar bears can live up to 30 years, or 35 in captivity. Polar bears are also able to filter out salt from their food through their kidneys, which isn't surprising, as polar bears are hypercarnivores, which are carnivores whose diet is more than 70% meat, making these the apex predator of the Arctic, although their diet does vary on their age, with most subadults scavenging whatever is edible. That being said, their main food source is seals, both adults and pups. Their preferred types are the ringed, barred and harp seals, as these are numerous, and have also the most meat on them. But they will on occasion eat hooded, spotted, ribbon and temperate, otherwise known as harbour seals. Adult male bears will also hunt walrus, targeting younger individuals. Beluga whales, narwhals, reindeer, birds and their eggs, as well as fish, are also on the polar bear menu. Unlike the rest of the bear family, polar bears don't really eat plants, because there are barely any in the Arctic, and the digestive system has now become too specialised in meat consumption. That being said, polar bears in the far south of its range, near the Hudson and James Bay, which is in Canada, will, during the summer, eat plants such as berries, moss, grass and seaweed, returning to the meat diet in the winter. The polar bear's vast fat reserves allow these bears to survive for months without eating anything. Because of the nature of the Arctic and how little resources there are, polar bears will occasionally engage in cannibalism, and, to top it all off, they're one of 3 animals which will actively hunt humans, although actual attacks are rare, and rarer still are fatalities, which is surprising when you consider that a polar bear will roam around 15,000 miles in a year, with an average of 7.5 miles per day. When running, polar bears are surprisingly nimble, with a top speed of 25 miles per hour, but they usually walk at 3 miles per hour. When walking, they will point their forefeet towards one another as a way to maintain grip. Polar bears, as mentioned, are proficient swimmers, going at 4 miles per hour, and have the ability to hold its breath for 3 minutes. When diving, like most animals, polar bears are primarily diurnal, and will sleep for 8 hours a week on average, often behind ice ridges, where they build shelters. But they can sleep anywhere. Polar bears are primarily solitary for most of the year, with the exception of a mother and her cubs, and also during the breeding season. But polar bears can be particularly tolerant of one another when they're on land, particularly males, who will form temporary alliances. With that being said, females with cubs will avoid all males. But if they meet another female with cubs, they will live together for a time. Polar bears will release scent through their feet. This is one of the ways polar bears keep track of one another. Polar bears make a variety of noises, but mainly it's chaffs, much like a train, although, despite what you may think, this noise comes from its mouth, not from its nose, which you should be hearing now, as well as a variety of other noises made by polar bears. See what I mean? Sounds like a train. When hunting seals, a polar bear will usually wait by a seal hole. When one pops up, the polar bear will use its claws and jaws to tackle and kill it. Although, if a polar bear sees a seal on an iceberg, they will swim towards it and jump out of the water. If the seal manages to escape this initial strike, the polar bear will pursue it into the water, holding its breath for 3 minutes until it returns with a kill, at which point it will drag the carcass onto the iceberg and begin to eat. Despite what you may think, polar bears will not hibernate through the winter, with the exception to this rule being pregnant females. Hey there folks, quick interjection from me. If you're enjoying today's video, well, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe with the bell on so you never miss an upload from now on. If you don't, well, Margaret, the glorious assistant, will be dispatched to your location, give you a few sandwiches and persuade you. If you get my drift from giving you a few sandwiches. Now, back to the show, as we begin talking about the breeding season, which occurs in spring, between March and May, on the sea ice. Males will follow female scent in winding paths in order to avoid confrontation with another male. It will take days before a male is able to mate with a female, as she needs to accept him. During this time, he will guard her and fend off rival males. Once the bond is forged between the two, they will stay together for 2 weeks, engaging in intercourse. If a male approaches a bonded pair, they will either attempt to fend him off or will run away. Once the 2 weeks are over, the pair will separate, and this process will repeat multiple times. It is not uncommon for a litter of polar bears to have multiple fathers. After spring, gestation will not begin straight away. Rather, it will begin development sometime between September and October. In the meantime, females will begin the process of building up fat reserves. Then, sometime between, as mentioned, August and October, the females will seek out and build a den for the winter. Dens can be built on the ice, but usually they're made on solid ground. A polar bear den is usually 4.9 feet wide and 3.9 feet tall. Once in hibernation, the female will fast, as well as internally recycle her waste. Gestation will restart during this time, and will last 9 months, although 2 of which the female will actually be pregnant. After these few months, a litter of cubs will be born, usually twins, but on occasion triplets. Cubs will only weigh 600 grams and are highly vulnerable for the first month of their lives, as their eyes will remain closed, relying totally on their mother's milk for sustenance, provide nutrition to grow. They will keep warm by their mother's body heat as well as the den. The mother and cub will leave the den sometime between late February and early April. For the first weeks, they will stay fairly close to the den, providing an opportunity for the cubs to explore the outside world, as well as giving the mother time to rest, after which they will move on to the ice. Until the cubs are a year old, they will stay close to their mother, including while she hunts, watching, learning, and practicing, usually on their sibling. At 1, they become more independent, but are still reliant on their mum. At this point, they're learning how to hunt. So by the time they reach 2, they're pretty much fully independent and able to feed themselves. At this point, they will begin to be weaned off their mother's milk. Polar bear goodbyes are as cold as the place they live. Often, the mother will simply walk off, securing the knowledge that she's done her part. The alternative is the male chases the adolescent cubs off so he can get with the mother. Females will reach sexual maturity first at 4 and will also reach adult size at this age. Males are 2 years behind at 6, will not reach their full size until 8 to 10 years old. But if they had reached this point, I'd be very impressed, as because of the harshness of their environment, many will die before they reach adulthood, with starvation being a common cause in many subadults. As the apex predator of the Arctic, combined with how few animals live up in the poles, there are few animals that are a threat to a polar bear, with the most dangerous thing being another polar bear. That being said, a fully grown walrus could kill a polar bear if it really wanted to, as well as a pack of Arctic wolves. That's pretty much it. But aside from themselves, the largest threat to polar bears is arguably humans, who have been living with polar bears for thousands of years, with bears playing a particularly important role in the Inuit culture, as the god Tontarsuk is the god of the sea and death, and is often depicted as a polar bear. The polar bear is also the national animal of Greenland, appearing on its coat of arms. They've also played an important role in Norse culture and folklore, with some Norse kings having pet polar bears. And Poland has a funny story about a polar bear, which I'll share at the end, because it's quite long, and now we have to talk about confrontations between polar bears and people. Polar bear attacks are uncommon, and between 1870 and 2014, there have been 73 recorded attacks. 20 of those were fatal. Usually, these were subadult males looking for food, or females protecting their young. Polar bears are quite fond of human rubbish, particularly during the summer. In response to this, the town of Churchill in Canada have constructed what they call a polar bear prison, where bears who were caught dumpster diving are held until the sea ice returns, at which point they will leave the village. Polar bears are particularly vulnerable to the effects of global warming and climate change. To put it simply, if the planet gets too hot and there's no sea ice, the polar bear cannot hunt and will slowly die out. For this reason, they are a poignant symbol of why we need to preserve the poles. That being said, currently, worldwide, there is an estimate polar bear population of around 22 to 31,000 mature individuals, and are classified as such in the vulnerable conservation category. And with that, we reach the end. Now, if you want to watch the story of the Polish polar bear, check out the card above you. But for those of you who are interested in learning more about the Arctic still, check out this video selected by Margaret about the woolly titan of the north. And remember to hit that like button and subscribe. This is your final chance, or else a polar bear will be dispatched to your location, and he's very hungry. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.